We have a moral obligation, an economic obligation, a political obligation to cancel student loan debt in the United States of America.
I sure as hell am not obligated to indulge your academic whims.
Bottom line is we should not be punishing people for getting a higher education. It is time to hit the reset button. Under the proposal that we introduced today, all student debt would be canceled in 6 months.
My name is Chuck Kyle, and in this video, I'm going to talk about whether or not we should forgive student loan debt. It's a question that's been on my mind for a long time, and I want to share what I have figured out. Let me walk you through the pros and the cons so you can decide for yourself which side of the fence you're on, whether it be the right side or the left. So what does student loan forgiveness mean from a fiscal perspective? I'll stick with Senator Bernie Sanders' plan to cancel all student loan debt, approximately $1.6 trillion. This framework can also be applied to Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's $1 trillion plan and the $400 billion plan by President Joe Biden. To start with, where does the money from student loans come from? All federal student aid programs, which include student loans, Pell Grants, work study, for example, are all funded by federal tax dollars paid by U.S. citizens. Each year, Congress appropriates money to fund these programs as part of the annual budget process. Once the budget is finalized, meaning passed by both the House of Representatives and the Senate and signed into law by the President, Congress electronically transfers the money from the Department of Treasury to the Department of Education. When you start to pay back the loans, it goes to one of the 10 servicers that's used by the federal government. When you make a payment, the money doesn't stop at the servicer. The servicer is simply collecting it for the federal government and managing your account. The money is then sent to the Department of Treasury, since that's where the student loan funding came from originally. This is all pretty straightforward. From here, it gets a little murky, and I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what happens. However, under the rules established by the Federal Credit Reform Act of 1990, the cost of a student loan is recorded in the federal budget during the year in which the loan is disbursed, taking into account the amount of the loan, expected payments to the government over the life of the loan, and other cash flows, all discounted to be a present value using interest rates of U.S. Treasury securities. Okay, so in a nutshell, forgiving student loan debt would be costly for the federal government. The government does not have the ability to just make the debt go away. It's not a zero-sum game by zeroing out the loans. When a student loan borrower makes the monthly payments, the government receives an interest payment as well as some of the principal on the loan. Without another revenue stream or reduction in expenditures, the government must issue more government bonds to cover expenses, increasing both the deficit and the debt. It eliminates a source of government income by cutting off the amount of loan principal and interest paid to the federal government each month from a cash flow perspective. In no scenario is debt forgiveness costless for the federal government, with the exception of one, that's increasing taxes. But let's go on to the arguments. One argument is, who cares about the federal government, and the student loan forgiveness will provide cash for people to spend in the economy. Overall, the evidence suggests that household spending would increase, but would not boost the GDP growth. In comparison, research from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco indicates a fiscal multiplier of COVID-19 stimulus spending greater than 1. Okay, so this means every dollar spent through direct purchases or transfer to businesses or households generate more than $1 increase in GDP. What about the student loan forgiveness? Estimates of a student debt forgiveness multiplier ranges from anywhere from 0.08 to 0.23, meaning for every $1 of loan forgiveness, GDP only increases less than 25 cents. Another argument is student loan forgiveness would let student loan borrowers start life without debt. Those in favor of student loan cancellation argue that Congress has bailed out corporations and rewarded billionaires. They claim it's now time to assist typical Americans. College has become a stepping stone to greater earnings and financial stability. Some supporters say that college students do not want to be forced into a massive debt that they can't even pay off to participate in the economy. While this isn't the magic bullet for higher education costs, student loan cancellation may help remove this obstacle so that more people will have a chance to pursue the American dream. Well, A counter to this is that the money would benefit more wealthy people because these are the students that have a more significant student loan debt. Lowell Ricketts, the senior analyst for the Institute for Economic Equality at the St. Louis Fed, said wealthy graduates disproportionately benefited from student loan repayments. Most loans contain a minimum balance of between $10,000 and $50,000. Generally, the remaining balance is reserved for those high-quality borrowers. They work in the highest earning occupations and hold about 2% of the total student loan debt. A counter argument I heard was from a friend of mine who said, well, what about us people who hadn't attended college? We're struggling too. Well, this is a valid point, and it needs to be considered when we debate on whether or not to forgive student debt. There's also an argument that this would narrow the racial wealth gap. Senator Warren and Senate Majority Leader Schumer argue that student loan forgiveness will help narrow the racial wealth divide. Well, given that I believe that the number one problem in the US right now is income inequality, this was the first argument that gave me pause in my firm no for forgiveness. Studies have shown that African American and Latino student loan borrowers would significantly improve their financial security and experience substantial demographic wealth increases if the government forgives student debt. According to a study, the typical African American borrower still owes more than 100% of their loan even in 12 years after college and has a higher default rate. This argument moved me from a firm no to how about a targeted program? Focusing on a needs-based forgiveness program instead of a blanket program is worth having a debate. Yeah, but student debt cancellation would help regular people, not just the wealthy. Well, I found this argument extremely weak. I look at federal student loan as like a startup capital for life. If there was a way to spend $28,650, which is the average student loan amount, on a new business that statistically showed you would earn close to $1 million over your lifetime, most would say this is a pretty reasonable expense. A quick search showed business startup loans for $30,000 typically run from about 6 to 10% with the terms of 1 to 5 years. According to studentaid.gov, undergrad interest rate is 6.8%, and the graduate or professional level is 7.9%, with terms into the decades. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a bad plan to me. So let me give you my final thoughts. Yes, if you are a college-educated millennial, the chances are that your student loan debt is in the front of your mind. With the average undergraduate repayment at $40,000 and rising, many students find themselves with 6 figures worth of debt when they eventually pay it all off before they even complete their degree. Going for a graduate degree, even more. The argument for forgiveness has been made by politicians from both sides and those who have been hurt by low wages or unemployment in recent years. A new study conducted by the Brookings Institute argues that forgiving student loans would be good for the economy, but it's not necessarily true to say that this will be equally stimulating the economy across all sectors. So, after all of my research, I have to say I'm still a hard no on a blanket forgiveness plan. Targeted? Yes. Blanketed? No. Is a blanket student loan forgiveness program the right thing to do? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.